I don't talk much, mister, but I can cook. Her voice was barely louder than the wind pushing dust across the ranch yard. The rancher had seen many desperate faces in his life. Runaways, drifters, widows, broken men, but never one like hers. She stood straight despite the long road behind her, hands folded as if holding herself together by will alone. Her dress was plain, her boots worn thin, her hair tied back without vanity. There was no pleading in her eyes, only quiet resolve. Caleb Hart wiped his hands on his coat and studied her like he studied a horse that had survived too much but refused to fall. The ranch was struggling. Workers came and went, food was always short, and silence had become his only companion since his wife's grave turned cold 5 winters ago. He almost said no, almost, but something in her stillness stopped him. "You're hired," he said, not knowing that those 2 words would change both their lives forever. Her name was Clara. She spoke little, and when she did, it was careful, as if words cost her something precious. The ranch hands noticed her the first evening when supper hit the table. The stew was rich, the bread soft, the beans seasoned just right. Men who usually ate in silence looked up, surprised. Caleb noticed too, though he said nothing. That night, for the first time in years, he finished his meal without the ache in his chest tightening. Clara worked before sunrise and after sunset, never complaining, never resting more than needed. She flinched at loud voices. She avoided touch. And sometimes, when she thought no one was looking, she stared at the hills as if waiting for something to chase her down. Days turned into weeks. The ranch began to feel warmer, not just from full bellies, but from the quiet order Clara brought. Caleb found himself listening for her footsteps in the kitchen, the way a man listens for rain after drought. One evening, he found her humming softly while stirring a pot, a sad tune that felt older than the land. He didn't ask about it. He never pushed. That was his way. Trouble came on a dusty afternoon when 3 men rode in hard. Clara froze when she heard their voices. Her hands shook. One of them laughed too loud, eyes sharp with recognition. Caleb stepped forward before words could turn ugly. He told them to leave. They didn't. Not until Caleb's hand rested near his gun and his voice dropped low with warning. When they finally rode off, Clara collapsed onto a chair, breath broken. That night she spoke more than she ever had. She had been sold once, promised safety, given fear. She escaped with nothing but what she could carry, and cooking was the only skill no one could take from her. Caleb listened, jaw tight, heart heavy. He didn't offer pity. He offered something better. "You're safe here," he said. And for the first time, she believed it might be true. The ranch changed in ways Caleb never expected. With Clara there, laughter returned, not loud but real. She still didn't talk much, but she smiled now. She sang while baking. She planted herbs behind the kitchen. And when winter came hard, she endured it without fear. The men respected her. Caleb admired her. And slowly, without a word spoken, something deeper grew between them. One night, a storm trapped them in the house. Thunder shook the walls. Clara froze, memories clawing back. Caleb sat across the room, not touching, just present. "You don't have to be afraid here," he said again, like a promise carved in stone. She looked at him then, not as an employer, not as a shelter, but as a man who had never once tried to own her. Her voice trembled when she spoke. "You never asked me to be more." Caleb answered simply, "You already are." The past didn't disappear, it never does, but it lost its power. Clara learned to speak when she wanted, to laugh without fear, to stand tall even when shadows passed. And when the men from her past returned one final time, it wasn't Caleb alone who faced them. Clara stepped forward, calm, unbroken. The law came. Truth followed. And the ghosts finally loosened their grip. Spring arrived. The ranch bloomed. One morning, Clara cooked breakfast slower than usual. When Caleb asked why, she met his eyes and said, "Because this feels like home." He swallowed hard. Later that evening, he placed a simple ring on the table, not demanding, not rushed. Just hope. She didn't speak. She simply nodded, tears falling into a smile. Years later, travelers would speak of the Hart Ranch, the best food for miles, the warmest welcome. The quiet woman who cooked like love itself was in every dish. And they would speak of the rancher who learned that strength doesn't shout, and sometimes the softest voices carry the greatest courage. Spring did not arrive all at once. It came the way healing does, quietly, almost shyly, until one morning, Caleb realized the land was green again, and Clara was laughing without covering her mouth. The ranch breathed differently now. Horses stood calmer. Men worked harder. And every evening when the sun dipped low, Caleb found himself walking back to the house with a strange certainty in his chest. Someone was waiting, not out of duty but by choice. Clara still didn't talk much. She never needed to. The way she set his plate aside before anyone else arrived. The way she remembered how he liked his coffee strong and silent. The way she stood beside him at the fence some evenings. Without asking questions, these were confessions deeper than words. One afternoon, a letter arrived bearing a seal she recognized too well. Her hands trembled, but this time she didn't hide. She handed it to Caleb. It was from the town court. Her past officially closed. Her name cleared. Her fear no longer chasing her through the night. She cried then, openly, into his shoulder. And Caleb didn't freeze or pull away. He simply rested his chin against her hair and stood like a mountain until the storm passed. That night, she cooked his favorite meal and finally said the words she had been carrying for months. She wasn't afraid to stay anymore. Caleb answered not with promises, but with action. He placed a new sign at the ranch gate the next morning. Heart Ranch, home, not just work. When travelers came, they noticed it wasn't just the food that filled them. It was the feeling of being seen. Clara became known as the quiet woman who healed people with meals. Caleb became known as the man who listened more than he spoke, and one evening, as the sky burned orange and gold, Clara slipped her hand into his, not out of need but certainty. "I don't talk much," she said softly, "but this is where I belong." Caleb squeezed her hand once, steady and sure. "Then stay," he said. She smiled. And the ranch at last felt complete. The wedding was not announced, not planned with noise or spectacle. It simply happened, the way everything true on the Hart Ranch did. One morning, Clara set the table with a white cloth she had been saving since the day she arrived, and Caleb noticed her hands were steady, no longer shaking with old memories. There was no priest from the city, no crowd, only a retired judge from the nearby town, a few ranch hands who had become family, and the wide sky standing witness. Clara wore a simple dress she had sewn herself late at night. Every stitch a promise she once thought she'd never be allowed to make. When Caleb took her hand, it was not possession, it was partnership. He didn't vow to save her. He vowed to stand beside her. And when she spoke her vows, her voice was quiet but unbroken, each word chosen carefully, like ingredients in a meal meant to last a lifetime. Afterward, there was laughter, real laughter, and a feast. Clara cooked with help she finally accepted. Because love had taught her she no longer had to carry everything alone. Years passed gently. Children came, first one, then another. And the ranch became a place people spoke of with reverence, not for its size but for its soul. Clara taught the children to cook before they could properly read, telling them that food was another way of saying you matter. Caleb grew older with peace in his bones, knowing the silence in his home was no longer empty. It was full of understanding. On quiet evenings, they still sat side by side without speaking, watching the sun fall behind the hills, their hands linked, hearts steady. And when travelers asked how such a strong home was built from so few words, Caleb would smile and nod toward the kitchen, where Clara stirred a pot slowly and surely. "She didn't talk much," he'd say, "but she taught us all how to listen." Time did what time always does. It moved forward, carrying the Hart Ranch into legend without ever asking permission. Caleb's hair silvered, his steps slowed, but his eyes never lost that calm steadiness Clara had first trusted. Clara, too, changed, not by becoming louder, but by becoming seen. Folks from distant towns came not just to eat, but to sit at her table and feel whole again. She never asked questions. She never offered advice unless it was asked for. She listened the way the land listens to rain, fully, without judgment. One autumn, a young girl arrived at the ranch gate with a bundle in her arms and fear in her eyes, speaking the same words Clara once had. "I don't talk much," Clara took her hands gently and said the only thing that mattered. "You don't have to." And in that moment, the circle closed. Caleb watched from the porch, understanding that the greatest legacy was not land nor cattle, nor a name carved on a gate. It was safety passed from one quiet soul to another. When Caleb's final winter came, it came softly, He passed in his sleep with Clara's hand in his, the house warm, the kitchen clean, the scent of bread still lingering. She mourned without breaking, because love had already given her everything it could. Years later, when Clara herself grew old and slow, children and grandchildren filled the ranch with life. On her last evening, she sat by the window, watching the sunset paint. The sky the same color it had been the day she first arrived. She smiled, not because life had been easy, but because it had been kind enough in the end. And when the ranch bell rang the next morning, the people didn't say she was gone. They said she had finally rested. The Heart Ranch sign still stands today, weathered but clear. Home, not just work. And those who pass through swear the food still tastes like care. The silence still feels safe. And the love, quiet, steady, unshakable, never left at all. Long after Clara's chair by the window sat empty, the Heart Ranch kept breathing, slow, steady, alive with memory. Wind moved through the cottonwoods the way her hands once moved through flour. The kitchen stayed warm, not from fire alone, but from habit passed down like a blessing. Grandchildren rose before dawn to knead dough the way she taught them. No rush, no waste. Listening for the moment the dough told them it was ready. Travelers still came, drawn by stories they couldn't quite explain, and they found what Clara had built without ever announcing it. A place where silence was welcomed and worth was assumed. On certain evenings when the sky burned gold and the hills held their breath, someone would swear they heard a soft hum near the stove. The same old tune, sad and hopeful at once. No one questioned it. They set another place at the table anyway. Years later, when drought threatened and tempers ran thin, the ranch did not harden. It remembered. It opened its gates wider. Food was shared. Work was shared. Grief, too. Because that was Clara's last lesson, spoken without words, that strength multiplies when it's given away. A young ranch hand once asked why the sign at the gate had never been replaced. Though the wood was worn, an elder smiled and said, because it still tells the truth. And on the quietest nights, when stars stitched the sky and the land rested, the ranch felt whole, held together by a woman who didn't talk much, a man who listened, and a love that proved the softest voices can outlast time itself.